Hello. Do y'all hear me like through the things? I have it on. Okay, I'll try to talk loud. But one of my favorite things in life with Judah is every time when we go to our church, we go to Saints Community Church, we have to drop him off to the nursery. And sometimes he's like really upset, he's crying. Other times he goes pretty good there. But anyway, we go back to pick him up. I'm usually there first. And he's just content playing on the floor. But then one of the ladies watching him or whoever would be like, "Hey, your dad's here." And he'll look at me, he goes, "Dada!" And he stands up and he runs over to the gate and just throws himself at me. It's like it's the joy of my heart, you know. So I guess like my question to y'all, which is y'all don't have to answer obviously, but just think about it, is wouldn't it be awesome to get to that place with God the Father, right? And that's what we're going to talk today about. But first, we're going to pause because we have a paid advertisement coming up. I'm just kidding. I'm just going to tell you about Chi Alpha stuff as my supporters. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So at Chi Alpha, we're doing really great. Chi Alpha campus ministry at Tulane. So we're reaching undergrads, grad students, international students, some professors, even though it's not really our ministry, but we have one of our director, he reaches out to professors. This semester I've been having a couple of Bible study, like life groups with undergrad students, and among them there's this one guy who I'm really excited about because he just caught this like vision of what he wants to do with the Lord. And he's just like, you can tell he has this like really wonderful relationship with God. He'll go home, he'll pray about what to do next within his ministry. And I say that because he started his own Bible study, and I just met him like in the fall. And I think he just started coming to my life group like at the end of fall. So it's really exciting to see what God's doing in his life. On top of that, we minister to a lot of international students, and among them is the Iranians. And I just want to point that out, that God is actually rescuing them right now. It's really awesome. One of them, this one young lady, she's PhD third year. She recently was telling me, she actually came to our Bible study group, like to do the Bible discussion. And after we went through the passage, she was like, "I feel like a lot of peace from this. Like I'm looking," she basically, without saying these exact words, she says, "I'm looking to know God." She has a friend back in Iran who is like a really strong atheist. He became a Christian, and he remained a Christian because of this constant peace that he had with God after that. And he recently talked to her on the phone, and she asked him, "Did you walk away from your faith yet?" Because she's like basically agnostic. And he was like, "No, I can't leave this peace. Like it's too convincing to me. Why would I go back to anything else?" And so she told me, like, basically she wants to know God. So we gave her a Bible, obviously, and we were ministering to her on Friday. And I 100% believe she's going to come to know the Lord really soon. And she's not the only one. There's like several Iranians who are coming to our Bible studies who are like, "That's really cool." Like one guy last Friday was like, "This is the first time I ever read a Bible in my entire life." And he wants to come back and do it again, you know. One of the guys who he graduated, he went to Pennsylvania with his wife. He started coming in his last semester, and it had to do with anxiety. He was like, "I just want to find something that, again, like peace." Like a lot of the Iranians are looking for peace. I mean, they have a really messed up government, which they hate themselves as well. And then also with them being barred from travel, it's kind of like really weighing on them a lot. But apparently he is a lot more at rest. He's been listening to podcasts, reading books. He's been going to churches to pray. And he told my other friend who's Iranian that he's a different person than he used to be. Like he used to go out and find his peace in getting drunk and partying and all that stuff. He said he doesn't do that anymore because he's found it somewhere else, something more solid, right? So thank you all for supporting us. We wouldn't be able to be there, obviously, if it wasn't for that. And my tablet just turned off, so we're going to come back to that. And yeah, we're going to be there. I have 2 year more commitment, 2 years more commitment on my my mission at Tulane, and it might go longer because it really depends on what the Lord wants to do. So please keep us in prayer and thinking about us and praying about being on our team as well for support. So today I want to talk about no chains required. Ultimately, it's coming to a place of where Judah is with me, where he just delights in his dad, That's going to be what we're talking about today. And there's two things that I think are just really easy for every human being, and that is rebellion and submission. And I think it's just natural that we're always in a state of rebelling against something and submitting to something else. There really is nothing in between, which is the reason why there's a war for our souls. And so you're either rebelling against God and submitting to something else in life, or you are rebelling against those things in life and submitting to God, And that can also happen just in things in life as well, like with politics, rebelling against one side and submitting to the other side. It's like really hard to be in the middle. Jesus says in Matthew 6:24, so let me use this thingy. No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. And so he has you can't infer like a third position here, like, well, I'm just standing idly serving no one. No, you're serving someone, even if that master is yourself. And so, I wanted to say this one story that I heard. We had a Chi Alpha staff meeting on Friday, and one of the ladies there, she has this girl in her small group, and as she's teaching, this girl's just on her phone, like messing around with like social media or something like that. And so she kind of got on her. She's like, why don't you pay attention and engage with what's going on? And the girl literally said, I want to pay attention, I want to engage, but I want my phone more. And then she even admitted that the desire to want to listen is so weak that she actually doesn't care that much. She's like, I kind of care more about being on my phone. It's often easier to submit to something that has what our flesh wants. And this could be the reason for the general apathy that we see in students at Tulane. Most students, you go talk to them about like meaning of life or just deep things in life, and they're like, I don't really care, So while we're submitted to something worldly or fleshly, when we're submitted to sin, we actually become active rebels to God. But on the other hand, while submitted to God, we become active rebels to worldly and fleshly things, to become active rebels to sin. But what I want to talk about with the title of No Change Required is when we submit to God, and this is the beautiful thing about God, there are no chains involved. It says in 2 Corinthians, now the Lord is that Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. So we're going to talk about that with the prodigal son story. But before we get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about what worship is. And a little disclaimer is all of us are going to waver back and forth between submission and rebellion to God. Like, it doesn't matter how long you've been with Christ. Like, there's going to be moments when you're going to rebel, and God knows that. So I don't want to sit here in judgment because, like, I waver all the time. So this is just an encouragement to get to that place. So when Judah was born, he obviously needed breast milk to live. He needed it to grow, to live, and to develop. His mama was his source of life. Going to anything else but his mama would have probably killed him, right? Or underdeveloped him in some weird way. Now, obviously, we have formulas. We have exceptions to that. But with the concepts of worship, especially back then, they didn't really have formula. You could have given kids like goat's milk maybe, but it wasn't always sufficient. So they usually had, if the mama couldn't produce breast milk, they had wet nurses who would do it for them. But the point is that baby needs a certain nourishment. No object could do that, and not even solid food. If you give solid food to a baby, it's not going to work. So in the same way, worship in the Hebrew, it refers to clinging to something. So it's like how a baby clings to its mama's breast. Worship is the act of drawing life and nourishment from something. And this is why we're warned so much in Scripture to avoid idols. Because if you attach yourself to something that is not God, that's not a source of life, you get nothing from it. So you're going to end up either dead or underdeveloped in life, and ultimately being in a place of hell. So worship is not music, but it can actively take place during times of adoration. It's not prayer, but it can actively take place during communion with the Father. It's not Bible reading, but it can actively take place during times of seeking the kingdom. And it is not even going to church, but it can actively take place during times of loving and caring for your brothers and sisters in a community. What worship is a life of submission to the Father. It's a life of trusting the Father. It's a life of willing obedience to the Father. But we can always misplace our worship. So if you take all the things I said, the submission, the trusting, and the obedience, and place it on something else that's not the Father, that's misplaced worship. So worshiping anything outside of God would be like a newborn baby seeking food apart from its mama's breast milk or apart from formula, if that makes sense. So what does death look like when you draw it from, when you worship an idol, like when you draw in emptiness and death from an idol? What does that look like? So, I wrote down a few things. It could be anxiety, could be depression, could be addiction, could be bitterness, could be self-elevation. I have this thing I put down as survival consumption. So like you're consuming things because you're afraid you're going to lose it all and you don't want to share it or be generous. So it's like, it's for my survival only. Codependency. We experience these traits with idols because we were not satisfied by what our idols feed us. We're not ultimately satisfied. We may think we are, but we keep going back because we rely on them. These chains become something we want. We fear losing these chains, and we can't live without these chains. And the reason why I say that is, we're going to see that in the prodigal son story. We're going to get into that a little bit, and why the younger prodigal son became in love with his chains for a time. So, I have this interesting thought when I was putting this together, which I call the hoarding test. So if you think of something in life that if it was to be taken away from you, or if someone was to get in the way of it, you would oppose that person almost violently, or you will freak out because it's been taken away from you. A simpler way of putting it, is there something in your life that you lack generosity in? Because, I mean, when it comes to generosity, you're willing to give it up because it's not your God, right? It's not something that, like, I need this to survive. You're like, I'm going to give it away because I don't trust in this thing. I trust in the Father. So a couple things could be, obviously there's money and wealth. There's comfort. There's relationships. There's hobbies or leisure time, which I know I feel that. Like if I can't get my alone time to do things, sometimes I'm like, oh, this is like so annoying. Especially when Judah needs me to like bounce him to sleep for an hour. That's kind of like frustrating, you know. There's rights and freedoms. There's political voice. There's even your basic needs. So like Jesus was like, when the devil's like, hey, turn your stone to bread. You have to eat to live, right? But he says, I don't live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from my Father's mouth. So even food and water is something we can hoard out of fear. If you say yes to any of those things, you might have an area of your life where you have misplaced worship, which is okay. I mean, it's not okay, but it's normal because we all have misplaced worship in some of these areas in our life. But it's good to be aware of that. But thanks to God who works with us anyway, even when we have misplaced worship. So before we get into the prodigal son, I want to talk a little bit about household rules. So in homes, or in our parents' homes, we find that parents set rules for their children to obey. These rules are meant to shape the child into something that pleases the parents. And if the parents are good, these rules are often good rules used to make good children. And the rules are not for the sake of the parent, but for the sake of the child. And so like a bad parent would be like, I want you this way for my sake. But a good parent is like, I want you this way for your sake. Like brush your teeth, for instance. It's for the health of the child's teeth. Benefits the child. Eat your vegetables. Don't hit people. Do your chores. Now, I mean, sometimes do your chores could be for the sake of the parents in some ways. But ultimately, you're trying to teach your kid to do your chores and to have a good work ethic, things like that. So the same is true for God the Father. Ooh, I didn't know it was going to be so small in there. I'll read it out loud to y'all for sure. So in Hebrews 12, 7 through 11, it says, endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, We have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good, in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. So a couple of things we'll see in here is we are disciplined for our good. It's not for God's good. It's for our good. We're disciplined because we are God's children, which that's an awesome thing to think of, you know. And a good parent disciplines in a way they think is best. So that's kind of cool. It's like the writer of Hebrews just talked about human fathers and human mothers. It's like a good parent is disciplining as best as they can, right, for the sake of the child. So household rules oftentimes are upheld by a fear of punishment. Children obey rules to avoid punishment. So a good parent, they ultimately want their child to willingly obey, but will minimally want obedience through fear in order to save the child from bad health or from becoming a monster later in life. Does that make sense? Right? A child is punished for cheating because their parents want them to not become cheaters later in life. Same thing with lying, same thing with hitting, and same thing with even doing chores. They want them to become something beautiful, right? And if it requires them to be afraid at first, it's kind of worth it, right? That's the same thing in the Bible. When we look through the whole story of the Bible, God started with an Old Testament law that was based on obedience through fear, but there was a hope that his children would progress to obedience through love, through obedience through being willing to obey the law because they loved their father, not because they were afraid they were going to get punished. We could see in the book of Judges, though, that without a law, there's chaos and death. If you read through the book of Judges, it starts out kind of okay, and then it gets to the end where someone gets like butchered and their body parts are sent throughout the whole country. It's pretty grotesque, but that's where it goes when there's no law, right? It's pretty crazy. The same is true with our societal laws. So laws in place in this country, for instance, were originally set up to enforce a structure of love, even if people continue to fail to love. And so here's an example I've been using since like January. It's been kind of on my heart a bit. But okay, I'm in a neighborhood, it's 20 miles an hour. I'm speeding because I'm trying to get home really fast. Let's say I'm running late for dinner or something, I'm hungry. I'm going like 30 miles an hour instead of 20. And then a child runs into the street, I hit the child, and then I'm devastated because obviously I did something I didn't really want to do. So that law, that 20 mile per hour speed limit, was there to protect that child and ultimately to protect me from doing something that I really didn't want to do, right? So the law is there. We obey the law because we don't want to be pulled over and get a speeding ticket. So it's originally just out of fear. But the point of the law is to get to that place where you're like, you know, I actually want to not injure anybody. So I'm going to obey this law, not because I'm afraid of it, but because I care about that child who's going to run out into the middle of the street, right? That's ultimately where the laws are trying to get us to. That's not to say we have perfect laws in this country or in this world, but that's the point of law in general. Paul says in Romans 5:13 through 14, "To be sure, sin was in the world before the law was given, but sin is not charged against anyone's account where there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from the time of Adam to the time of Moses, even over those who did not sin by breaking a command, as did Adam, who was a pattern of the one to come." So the point of this passage is before the law even became a thing, there was still sin that was killing people. And so the law was given to show people what sin is and to punish people in order to keep them from dying in sin. It was ultimately a thing of love. Law was meant to shape people into people of love, ultimately. But what do children think about their parents' rules, though, typically, right? Arbitrary, enslaving, stupid, undesirable. And so humans think the same way about God's laws all the time. One thing I put in quotes is, some people might say, I want to do this. God is a tyrant for not letting me do it. It's no big deal. You know, things like that. God is asking us to trust him just like a good parent is asking their child to trust them, but most people don't trust him. Instead, they trust what the world says and what their bodies want, and so they run from their father. There's another side of this coin, which you're going to see in the prodigal son story. Some of God's children who stay at home, they still believe his rules are enslaving. yet they do them anyway. They obey those rules as duties. Maybe because they still feel punishment, so they're like, I'm just going to do it so I don't get punished. Maybe because they just want what their father has. Maybe they want to go to heaven. They want blessing. As we're going to see in the story, the oldest son wanted the inheritance, so he stuck around because he didn't want to not please his father, right? Like the younger child did. So all of us at times will fall into one of these two categories. So we're going to read this, and I actually hope it does convict us today, because that's what's going to cause change. So let's see. Let's start the prodigal son. Jesus continued, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had and set off for a distant country. This is my favorite passage in the entire Bible. The prodigal son sums up the gospel message more beautifully than I think almost any other story in the Bible. It also reveals the character of God to rebels, which is amazing what the father does for the son. So this first son he's the runaway. He grew up in his father's home. He inevitably followed his father's rule, but something caused him to want to leave, which, as we read through the story, I believe it had to do with his father's rules in his house. He wanted freedom. What we do know is that he requests for his inheritance, which is what his father had. So he didn't want the father. He wanted what his father had. He wanted that wealth. And be that it's an inheritance, he essentially wished his father was dead already. So that kind of says what he thought about the father, right? He's like, I wish you were dead. I just want your stuff. I want to go do my own thing. So then he leaves. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. So he squandered his wealth. So when I think about the wealth that he had, the inheritance, I think of love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, like the things of God. Ultimately, it's abundant life. So when he was at his father's house, he was satisfied by life. He had what he wanted. But he wanted to take what his father had, go into the world, and find it there as well. However, without God as a source to replenish this wealth, it cannot be replenished outside of him. So this is just like the breast milk for the baby. The other thing was there was a severe famine. I think this famine is symbolic of 2 things. One thing is it's symbolic of something that's unpredictable. So you go out into the world, you put your trust in something else, then something comes in and takes it all away, and you've lost it. There's no getting it back. The other thing, well, I have some examples, like money can be lost, relationships can be forever broken, pleasures can be addictive and draining, politics can be turned upside down, or the politicians can be dishonest, rights can be taken away. So that's some examples of how these unpredictable things will steal the things we put our hope in. The other thing about famine too is is barrenness, it's emptiness. And so when you go to place your hope in an idol or something that you think you can put your hope and trust in, what you get back is emptiness. You get back nothing. Because of this, he was not only moneyless, but he was completely destitute. He had no food and no means of getting food, so he was forced into slavery, right? He became a pig watcher or caretaker, whatever they do. So hungry that he wanted to eat what the pigs ate, and even though he cried out for other people to help him, they would not meet his need. What I think of here is, in a place of starvation, we find that most runaways, want to hold on to their chains because, by God, they have to survive somehow, right? Even if they have to eat the pods out of the mud, they're not going to give those pods even to the pigs. They're like, these are my pods. And so you clasp after those things, those dead things. And it makes sense, because if you're dying, you don't know where else to go, you're going to probably do that. But guess what? He came to his senses. He said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? Here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. So he came to his senses. He compared his two slaveries, the slavery of the world versus the slavery of his father's house. And his conclusion was that at least his father would feed him continually. He will always be satisfied in his father's house. It was stable. He realized apart from his father, nothing else was stable. So he decided to rebel against the world and to submit to his father as a slave. So here's a fun fact that we don't really see in the beginning, like spelled out to us. But he felt like a slave even before when he was a son, right? That's why he left. Why would he leave otherwise? He felt like, oh, your rules are just like slavery to me. I'm going to show that with a few verses that are echoed here. So Exodus 16, 2-3. In the desert, the whole community grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The Israelites said to them, if only we had died by the Lord's hand in Egypt. There we sat around pots of meat and ate all the food we wanted. But you have brought us out into this desert to starve this entire assembly to death. And then in Numbers 14, 1-4. That night, all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Kind of crazy how it's the same exact language here. The runaway, well, the Israelites say to Moses and Aaron, like, we had food, we had satisfaction while we were in chains in Egypt. Let's go back to that slavery, you know? So we're comparing two slaveries, and they chose the world slavery at that point. Whereas the runaway says, how many of my father's servants have food to spare? So he was comparing the two as well, but he goes the opposite way. And I think this is really interesting because I think it shows firstly that the prodigal thinks his father thinks himself as being a slave to his father, even as a son. But yeah, I don't know. This is something more to meditate on. I encourage you to meditate more on this echo here. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. So right here is the key to everything in life. This is the key to the gospel. This is the beauty of God. And this is something that if you can grasp, you would be running to him every moment of every day, right? You would be rebelling against sin at every moment of every day if you can really grasp right here what the Father does. In this moment, the Father breaks this condition of rebel slave, like where we're constantly rebelling and constantly enslaving to one another. And the reason is because when we enslave ourselves to the Father, he actually liberates. He breaks the chain. He set him up as his son and not as a slave. And in that liberation, we are fully satisfied at all times. Paul says in Romans 8, 14-16, for those who are led by the Spirit of God, or the children of God, the Spirit you received does not make you slaves, that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought about your adoption to sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. So Abba is like what Judah says, Dada, and he runs at me. Like, Daddy, Father, you know. Sons and daughters do not live in fear. Before we go more into that, though, I do want to point out the older brother. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother has come, he replied, and your father has killed the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders, yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours who has squandered your property with prostitutes comes home, you kill the fattened calf for him. My son, the father says, you were always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. So, I mean, we find the son's out working in the field, so he's doing his duty. But was his diligence to the Father one of love? I mean, it doesn't seem like it when he says, I'm out here, and go back to it. He says, I've been slaving for you. So he's like, I've been your slave. He gets mad that he's received nothing from the Father. So this indicates that he only cares what the Father can give him, right? Maybe he did fear his father, or maybe he feared that he would lose his inheritance if he ran away. Even though he probably likely wanted to. He was probably a little jealous. Like the brother runs away and he comes home and he gets blessed. Like, what the heck's up with that? I should have ran away. Do you think there are Christians who fear they will lose blessing or heaven if they run away? And because of that fear, they don't run away? You think it's more about that than it is about the Father, right? Do you think they would run away if they thought they could find blessing in heaven somewhere else? Do any of us think that way? Do we submit to God out of fear of losing what he has for us? Or do we submit to him because we actually love him? We run to him with delight in our hearts. God has always been wanting to move us from this place of fearful obedience to a place of loving obedience. And we see this in Jesus when he sums up the entire law with 2 commands, to love God and to love other people. This is the movement that God desires. This is why we move from the Old Testament law to the New Testament covenant of grace. This is why Jesus says, I no longer call you servants, I call you friends. This is why we were drawn to move from the position that only sees God as Lord and Master to a position that sees him as father, spouse, and friend. So like spouse and friend, what person submits to a spouse who is good out of fear, right? Isn't it out of love? What about a good friend? It'd be kind of weird if we like kind of submitted or, sacrificed stuff for ourselves in order to bless our friends because we were afraid of them. Like, I'm afraid I'm going to lose this friendship, There shouldn't be any fear involved. It should be love. And as for the Father, and this is something Judah does every morning with me. He did it this morning as well, and it was awesome. If I can if I can have the muscular endurance in my arms to hold him for 45 minutes while I make my smoothie and coffee every morning, and all the other stuff we got to do in the kitchen, I would. But he weighs a lot now. So anyway, but he wants me to pick him up, and he wants to put all the bananas in and the strawberries and the ice, and he'll be like, what do you do this morning? I know he said coffee. That was kind of cute. But he said, we have the protein powder. He's like, powder! And I'm like, so anyway, his working with me does not help me make smoothies or coffees. In fact, it is very inefficient. And if I was trying to go for efficiency, I would rather him not be there with me, right? Just do it myself. I do it better anyway. But obviously it's not about the smoothie or the coffee that I'm making, right? It's about my time with him. And that's how he feels towards me, I think. He doesn't tell me. But I think he enjoys being with me. And I love that moment because there's a place of delight. He's delighting in me and what we're doing. I'm delighting in him and what we're doing. And that's where the Father is trying to move us. It goes from mere duty to extravagant and lavish love. I'll give you some examples that has been commands throughout Scripture and what people have followed in churches. So one thing is the tithe, which I know that as long as y'all been under my dad, neither of us agree that tithe is a command for today, really. I'm guessing you still feel that way. But anyway, tithe has been pushed in a lot of churches. But I believe the tithe was originally set up in the Old Testament to bring people to a place of becoming generous people with their wealth. But they weren't supposed to be like, okay, well, I need a tithe because I'm robbing God's storehouses, as if God needs your money, right? Or I need to get a blessing from God. That's the worst reason to tithe, right? But we move from tithing in the Old Testament to pure generosity in the New Testament. Generosity goes beyond tithing. It's like okay, well, 10% might be like $2,000 or something like that. Okay, here you go. Here's your check. I'm gone. But then you see someone in need who needs $10,000 for something. Maybe they had surgery and all these collectors are coming after them. And you feel in your heart wow, I love this person and I love God. I'm going to give them $10,000 even though that hurts me. That's the place where God is leading us because it's out of love. And we have no fear or anxiety. I lost my money. It's oh no, what am I going to do now? It's not about that. It's no, I trust my Father. He's going to provide for me, right? Same thing with obligated prayer. Okay, I prayed, nice, check the box off. But Paul goes like, pray continuously. Like, I mean, obviously that's not us like constantly talking to God. That would be like impossible. But I mean, it's being in a place of constant like communion with the Father, not because like I need to be, but because I love him and I want to talk to him and I want to hear from him. Church attendance versus the Acts 2 community, which I didn't have it up there, but I can just like read to you on here. This is in Acts 2:42 and on. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. I just see like incredible, extreme hospitality and love in that community. Like, because a lot of people are like, okay, I go to church, went to church every Sunday, God, so what do you got for me? You know? No, it's not about that. It's about we love each other, right? We want to be here together to love one another and outside of church as well. Jesus actually used the examples of murder and adultery. He's like, that's great, you're not killing people, but you're still hating people in your heart. It's like, I want you to go beyond that. Like, not only do I not want to like actually kill somebody, I want to actually love them and not hate them. Adultery, it's good you're not physically cheating on your wife or husband, but you know, maybe just not even go to the point of lust at all, right? Maybe fight against that. And it's not because I have to, it's an obligation. I'm a Christian, I got to do that. God's going to spank me if I don't. No, it's I love God. I love my wife. I love my husband, so I'm going to not do this. Matthew 11:28 through 30. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So when is Jesus' yoke easy and his burden light? And I think it's when you come to a place of delighting in him. Because if you're doing just your duties, it's not going to feel easy. It's not going to feel light. You're going to feel like, oh, I've got to do this, got to do that. But when you get to a place where you're like, I want to do this, like I want to do that, it all becomes easy and light. Something we see about the Father in this story is it shows a picture of how faithful God is no matter our motives. Like the Son, he came back to the Father. It doesn't seem like because of the Father. He came back because he knew he can get some food in his belly. He was like, I'm just going to be a slave, but I want to eat some food. But guess what? The Father still liberated him, made him his son anyway. It's like, okay, bad motives, I'm still going to love you and liberate you. The older son's like, you do all this for him, and what about me? I've been your slave all my life. And what does the Father say to him? Let's see if I can go back to it. Wait, that was it. He said, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. That's just crazy. You think the Father would be like, dude, get out of here, you know? He's like, no, you're still with me, and you have my stuff. But just come inside so we can love your brother. Does the Father seem like he really cares? Or let's say cares, but do you think that he values the inheritance and the property more than his sons? Like, no, he doesn't care. He doesn't even mention the inheritance. When the younger son's like, give me my inheritance, he's like, okay, take it. It's not that big of a deal. You know, same thing here. It's like, you have everything I have. Just come be with us inside, you know? It's like, it's all about love and delighting. And so my question is, do you want to move to that place of delight where things are restful, things are easy? I mean, it's the whole point of Christianity. Christianity isn't just like religiously doing things because we're going to be in heaven. No. Christianity is literally being in a place of peace and love with the Father that spills out into this world. Because God's job isn't making smoothies and coffee in the morning, right? His job is finding those who he is calling to come back into his family. And so that becomes an easy and light thing when we are delighting in the Father. So I'll leave you with, I don't have it up there, but ponder on this one question: what can you practice to get there? What can be something you put into practice in your life to get to a place of delighting in the Father? Sometimes it takes sacrifice. It takes doing things you don't really want to do. But if your goal is like, I want to love you, Father, so I'm going to keep doing this thing in order to do that, I would say put that into practice then. So, but that's the end right there. So.